Space Odysseys, Ancient Chinese Secrets, Hulkamania, and Yo Mama.
Your mother's, maybe.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about the Nintendo Switch remake, the hidden gem, Live Alive. Hi everybody, I'm Wes, this is Wes Does a Video Game, and today we're going to talk about Live Alive, or Live a Live, for the Nintendo Switch. This was originally a game on the Super Famicom. It was Japan only, so it just came out to the Western world for the first time in like 20 years. And it's a really fun JRPG. If you like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy III or stuff like that, then you're going to really like this game. And if that's not really your bag, you might still like it anyways because the storyline is so unique and varied that there's kind of something for everybody. So without further ado, let's dig into Live a Live. Live Alive. Live a Live. This game. Live Alive is a remake of the Japanese Famicom game of the same name, with both versions directed by Takashi Tokita, famous for Chrono Trigger. In fact, the original game came out before Chrono Trigger and shares a lot of similarities gameplay and story-wise. The Switch remake features 2.5D graphics, very much in the style of Octopath Traveler or Triangle Strategy. Personally, I love this art style, as it perfectly blends the old with the new. This is an anthology story, focusing on 8 different plot lines that are at first completely independent, but eventually start to tie together towards the end of the game. Each story takes place in a different era, spanning from the prehistoric to the distant future. The gameplay is your standard classic RPG fare, collecting items, equipping weapons, making tough decisions, and battling monsters. The combat system plays out like your typical SNES era Final Fantasy RPG, where you can attack or defend, use skills, or run away. What Live Alive adds to the formula is a grid system, which allows you to move and attack in multiple directions. This adds a little bit of strategy. If you're low on health, you could keep your distance. If several enemies are clustered together, you could hit multiple targets. You get the idea. Live Alive was the directorial debut of Takashi Tokita, who set out to make a game telling multiple stories, all in one narrative. The anthology format and storytelling has never had too much commercial success, despite being a favorite mechanism for auteurs like Quentin Tarantino. Tokita going against the grain, combined with the game never leaving Japan, may have been the main contributor to its poor sales. After release, only 270,000 units were sold, which is considered a pretty big flop. Still, its impact was pretty tremendous, considering it helped lay the foundation for the 1995 commercial hit Chrono Trigger, a game that also placed heavy importance on time travel, real-time strategy combat, and multiple endings. Because the original Famicom game never had an international release, most of the world had never even heard of Live Alive before the announcement for the remake on the Nintendo Switch. I know I had it, and I love classic Square RPGs. Fortunately, the team at Aeon Genesis created a pretty good English translation patch of the original game, and they even went as far as to add different fonts for each era, a small but nice improvement on the original material. Breaking from the standard formula, where each level gets progressively more difficult, Live Alive's chapters are all relatively the same difficulty. That way you could play them in any order. Another unusual choice, but one that Tokita felt would give the players more say in how the story unfolded. 7 famous manga artists were brought in to design the 7 eras. This was a creative way to ensure that each section of the game didn't just feel like a different time period, but a different genre altogether. Notable artists include Gosho Aoma, creator of Detective Conan, and Yumi Tamura, creator of Basara. The distant future is inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey. The Wild West's protagonist is designed after Clint Eastwood, and the present-day narrative drew inspiration from contemporary Japanese wrestlers. Tokita really was aiming for something ambitious, and it's amazing that he and his team were able to put together something cohesive from such weird and different ideas. Yoko Shimomura was the sole composer in Live Alive, and it was her very first job after joining Square. She would go on to make some of the best video game soundtracks of all time, notably Secret of Mana, Super Mario RPG, and of course, Kingdom Hearts. It's no surprise that the remake resembles Octopath Traveler so much. Takashi Tokita joined the team responsible for Traveler, and after seeing its success, he was convinced the market was finally ready for Live Alive again. I don't have many negative things to say about this game. The storyline is a little short, which makes sense since it was a remake of a Super Famicom game, and specifically, a game that had to be short by its nature. It featured many different locations and art styles, so there wasn't a lot of repeated textures and graphics. A full-length game with all those different locations would have been a lot to ask for the Famicom's limited memory. But what it lacks in depth, it makes up for in uniqueness. It isn't just that each era tells a different story, each era also features totally different gameplay, so things never really get too boring or repetitive. The Western era is basically a giant scavenger hunt, the prehistoric era is a crafting game, and the modern era is a Mega Man boss gauntlet. Some chapters you'll like more than others, but I think there's definitely something for everyone here. Tokito wanted the battle system to play out like a real-time shogi, which is kinda like chess. I kinda see what he was going for. There's definitely some strategy involved in how you move your units on the board, but without really knowing what your enemy's powers are, and no way of gauging exactly when they'll attack, there's not too much complexity involved here. It's fun, don't get me wrong, but it's about as deep as this sort of game will allow considering the limited amount of time you have to level up or, develop your characters. I guess the only gripe I have about Live Alive is that it's hard to get into leveling up your characters when you know the story will last like an hour. RPGs are time sinks by nature. Beating the final boss of an RPG, after spending dozens of hours developing your characters and equipping the best items, could be really satisfying, because you put the time and effort into grinding. For some chapters in Live Alive, when I'd receive an item, I'd think, what's the point of even equipping this? I only have one fight to use it. So the idea of a bunch of micro RPGs is novel on face value, but it's not necessarily a concept that could go very far. My favorite part of Live Alive, easily, was the soundtrack. Yoko Shimomura does it again, creating catchy song after catchy song. Megalomania is a real banger, and each era-appropriate track does a great job at establishing the tone and location of the story. The graphics are also great. Like I said, the 2.5D art style is wonderfully done and is the best way to honor the original game while improving on it. Even the bosses being drawn as gauche caricatures is a long forgotten relic of the early Final Fantasy days, and it's really cool to see that they brought that back. I really love the polish and smart design choices this game made, like even just something as simple as the loading and pause menus being different depending on where you're at in the game. Really nice detail work that's just, chef's kiss emoji. Live Alive could maybe be best described as a jack of all trades. It really doesn't do one thing perfectly, but it does do a lot of things pretty good, and its ambition and willingness to subvert the player's expectations makes it, in my opinion, worth playing just for that sake. In the Imperial China era, an aging kung fu master seeks out 3 youths to carry on his work before he dies. Throughout the chapter, you'll get the chance to train the hot-tempered Lei Kugo, the voracious Hong Haka, or the meek Yun Zhao. You could spend time grinding experience for one or all of them, but in the end, you could only choose one of them to be your disciple. So, who should you choose? Well, they all have their strengths. Hong has high HP, Yun is a glass cannon, and Lei is super fast. If you try to level them up evenly, like I did, not realizing that 2 of them were going to die, well, the game defaults to Hong surviving, so hopefully you like Hong. During the Twilight of Edo chapter, you could convince a mimic monster to join your ranks, but it's not easy. You need to speak to a man in the tea room and make the correct dialogue choice. You need to fight him as a mini-boss, then a hidden room will open up. Inside is a tiny slot. Insert 3 Koban coins, then enter another secret room. There's a weird doll. Bring it to life using the mainspring item. Fight the mimic. Then he'll join. It's a lot of work, especially considering that he'll permanently die the moment you leave the castle, but still, 2 are better than 1.
Double is the one for you.
The 4 cowboy buddies who frequent the Crystal Saloon are named after 4 influential American Western stars. Clint, of course, is named after Clint Eastwood. Wayne, after John Wayne. Gibson is likely named after Hoot Gibson, one of the first Western stars of the silent film era. And Gene is likely named after Gene Autry, the famous singing cowboy of film and radio. If you go into Annie's room during the trap setting section of the chapter, you'll acquire her diary. This item only serves one purpose, and that's to return it to her to troll her. During the trap setting section, you could find the bartender's prized possession, a pinup poster, by searching his room. He doesn't want to give it up, so you'll have to insist on taking it. Later, during the ambush, it does in fact successfully distract one of Odio's men.
Why in the hell someone put this here, of all places?
After defeating Odio, Mad Dog decides that his partnership with the Sundown Kid has reached its end, and that they need to resolve their unfinished business. You'll be thrown into a final battle with Mad Dog, and you'll have to kill him. It's a tough pill to swallow if his character grew on you. However, there is a way to avoid this. During the battle, simply choose the flee option. This will lead to an alternate ending, with Mad Dog putting down his weapon. Later, he runs into Sundown again, this time riding Horse Odio. The cowboys fight again, and Mad Dog loses again. Well, at least he got to survive this time. In the open wilderness area, before entering the first cave, you could use Pogo's signature sniffing ability to find the elusive King Mammoth, a super-powered optional boss that will stomp you down if you're not careful. This is one of, if not the hardest, battles in the game, so come prepared. In that same area, you'll find a rock that kinda looks like a human face. Press the interaction button exactly 100 times next to the face. I know this sounds like an N64 era urban legend, but this is literally a thing. On the 100th interaction, head west to discover a newly opened cave entrance. Inside, you'll find a giant black monolith, a reference to 2001. Offer it a bone,
Good night, everybody.
and it will give you the Rock of Rocks, an invaluably important accessory, especially in the final chapter. In the distant future, you ride aboard the Cogita Ergo Sum. In Latin, this translates to, I think, therefore I am. It's a fitting name considering you play as a sentient robot. In the distant future, Captain Square is a game inside a game. It's a fun little distraction, only problem is, every time you exit the game, you lose all progress. So what you need is a memory card. In order to get the memory card item, use the computer on the wall and input warp speed. The computer will inform you to check under the bed. You can now save your progress inside Captain Square. In Masaro's chapter, you'll face a familiar American wrestler in the ring. His name? Max Morgan. But, come on, we all know this guy clearly is based on Macho Man Randy Savage.
You're going nowhere!
New to the remake, Sin of Odio is the true final boss. You can take him on with all 7 of your heroes, which makes for a more satisfying ending than the original. The true ending happens when you collect all 7 characters, defeat the final boss, and then choose to spare him. The good ending is you spare the final boss, but you haven't collected all 7 characters. The bad ending, you don't collect all 7 characters, and you don't spare the final boss. The badder ending, you play as Odio and defeat the main characters. And the baddest ending, you either lose to Odio, or if you're playing as Odio, trigger Armageddon. This leads to exactly what you think is going to happen. I had a lot of fun with Live Alive. I definitely liked some chapters or eras better than others. The Imperial China level I didn't really like very much because it was just the same battle over and over and over again. Kind of just grinding for the sake of grinding. I don't really like that. But, you know, other chapters like Wild West I really liked because the storyline was good and it was kind of a scavenger hunt, which is different for an RPG. And there was only a couple battles, so the few times you do fight, it's actually challenging and it doesn't, you know, get on your nerves because it's doing the same thing over and over. But there's a lot of variety between each chapter or each era, and that's really cool. There's something for everybody. Even though it doesn't always hit the mark every time, it's really ambitious, and I really appreciate that it's just a game that does something different for once. I'm really hoping this game inspires other publishers to do the 2.5D art style some more. You know, I would pay full price for a 2.5D Golden Sun or a 2.5D Breath of Fire or Final Fantasy III, or, you know, the obvious choice, a 2.5D remake of Chrono Trigger. I think lots of people would be excited about that. So go out and buy Live Alive and show your support for the publisher, and maybe more games like this will come out in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Wes is Doing Things. I'm just getting started out on YouTube, so I could use all these subscribers and the likes and everything that I could get, and I appreciate every one of them. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.